The sterile hum of the hospital filled the air when Lily woke again. Her first sight was a pale blue ceiling and a quiet rhythm of machines. Her body ached, her mind fogged, but there, sitting beside her bed, was Ethan. His expensive suit looked rumpled for the first time. His tie was loose. His eyes, tired, almost afraid. "You fainted," he said, voice low, as if speaking too loud might shatter her. "Severe exhaustion, dehydration. You scared the hell out of everyone." I didn't mean to," she whispered, throat dry. He shook his head. "You don't have to apologize for collapsing." For the first time since she joined his company, Lily saw Ethan without the armor of perfection. He looked human. Vulnerable, even. The memory hit her, endless overtime, skipped lunches, ignored headaches. She'd been trying to prove herself in a place where mistakes weren't forgiven. Ethan Coal Industries wasn't known for mercy. Yet here he was, pulling the blanket up around her shoulders like he'd been waiting years to care about someone. "Why are you here?" she asked softly. Ethan hesitated, then glanced at her line. "Because I was the one who caught you. And I couldn't leave after that." The words hung between them like fragile glass. Lily turned away, embarrassed by the warmth rising in her chest. The man everyone feared had carried her through a crowd, shouting for help. He'd knelt in his $1,000 suit on the cold floor, cradling her like something precious. Outside, the rain began to fall against the window, tracing slow rivers down the glass. "I shouldn't have pushed you so hard," Ethan finally murmured. "You've been working on that campaign non-stop." She gave a faint smile. "You expect perfection." His lips pressed into a thin line. "Not like this." Silence again. Heavy, full of things unsaid. Then, quietly, he stood. "Rest. I'll handle everything at the office." Lily blinked in surprise. "You? Handle the office?" A ghost of a smile touched his face. "Don't sound so shocked." When he left, she stared at the door long after it closed. She didn't understand what had just changed, but something had. The walls between them had cracked. Later that night, the nurse returned, adjusting Lily's four. "You're lucky," she said with a knowing grin. "Most bosses wouldn't drive their employee here themselves. He refused to leave your side until you woke." Lily's heart skipped. She hadn't realized how deep exhaustion could hide loneliness, until someone finally cared enough to stay. Through the dim hospital light, her thoughts tangled in a blur of confusion and gratitude. Maybe he wasn't just a man of steel and success. Maybe he was someone who had forgotten how to rest too. If you were standing there that day, watching her collapse, what would you have done? Be honest, would you have stopped, or walked away thinking someone else would help? Thought balloon. If words fail you, just tap red heart # to say compassion still matters. The next morning, sunlight crept through the blinds, warming Lily's pale face. She blinked awake to find a small paper bag on her bedside table, coffee, a croissant, and a note written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting. "Eat something before you try saving the world again. EC." Lily smiled despite herself. It was simple, but it felt personal. For someone like Ethan Coal, even a scribbled note felt like a confession. A knock came at the door. She turned, expecting the nurse, but it was him. Dressed sharply again, yet softer somehow, he carried a bouquet of white tulips. "You didn't have to," she started. "I know," he interrupted gently. "But I wanted to." He placed the flowers on the table, glancing briefly at the note she'd already unfolded. A flicker of guilt crossed his face. "You weren't supposed to see that yet." "Too late," she said with a small laugh. Ethan's eyes softened. "You're laughing. That's good." She looked at him then, really looked. Beneath the wealth, the confidence, there was something raw, maybe even lonely. He wasn't just her boss anymore. He was a man who looked like he'd spent years carrying something he never spoke about. "How long have you been here?" she asked quietly. "Since they moved you from emergency to recovery," he replied, voice tight. "You were out for almost 12 hours. Lily's eyes widened. "You stayed the whole time?" He didn't answer. Just slipped his hands into his pockets and looked away. "I didn't realize you cared that much," she whispered. He finally met her gaze. "Neither did I." The words were barely a breath, yet they hit harder than any confession could have. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The world outside seemed to still, the only sound the beeping of the heart monitor that suddenly felt too loud. Lily broke the silence first. "You don't have to take responsibility for me, Ethan. I chose this job. I chose the hours." He shook his head. "You chose to prove yourself in a world that doesn't see kindness as strength. I built that world. And now," his voice faltered, "I'm starting to wonder if I've been wrong all this time." She blinked, stunned. The man who built an empire was questioning his own foundation because of her. "You're not wrong," she said softly. "You just forgot what people look like when they break." Ethan's eyes darkened. "I've seen people break, Lily. I just never thought I'd be the reason." She reached for the croissant, trying to lighten the air. "You sound like a tragic novel now." He actually smiled. A real one, small and uneven but genuine. "Maybe I've been living one." The nurse peeked in, breaking the moment. "Good news, Ms. Ray. The doctor says you can be discharged tomorrow." Lily's heart sank more than she expected. Tomorrow meant goodbye. And goodbye meant pretending none of this mattered. When the nurse left, Ethan adjusted his cufflinks, his old armor returning piece by piece. "I'll have a driver ready in the morning." She nodded, her throat tight. "Thank you, for everything." As he turned to leave, she said, "Ethan?" He paused. "I didn't fall just because I was tired. I fell because I stopped taking care of myself, trying to be what you needed." He froze. Then, slowly, he turned back. "Maybe what I needed was someone to remind me we're all human." And before she could reply, he left. She lay there, heart pounding, unsure if the warmth spreading through her chest was gratitude or danger. Have you ever had someone help you when no one else would? Sparkles. Write yes and tell me their name. Maybe your gratitude will reach them somehow. The next day unfolded quietly. Morning light spilled across the hospital bed as Lily packed her few things, the cardigan she always wore too long, the notebook filled with ideas, the note Ethan had left behind. When she stepped outside, the air felt different, lighter, yet full of something unsaid. A sleek black car waited at the curb, the kind of luxury vehicle that drew stares. The driver bowed slightly. "Mr. Cole's orders?" She hesitated before getting in. Through the tinted glass, the city blurred past, people rushing, horns blaring, the world still spinning as if she hadn't almost vanished from it. At her apartment, the driver handed her a small envelope. "From Mr. Cole. He said you'd know when to open it." Inside was a single card with a handwritten line. "Rest today. Tomorrow, come to the office at noon, not as an employee. As someone I owe an apology." Her pulse quickened. An apology? From Ethan Cole? That was like rain falling upward. Lily spent the rest of the day pacing, trying to convince herself it meant nothing. Yet her thoughts kept circling back to him, his eyes when she woke, his voice when he said he stayed, the way his fingers trembled when he adjusted her blanket. By noon the next day, she found herself standing outside his office. The glass doors reflected her nervous face back at her. The receptionist smiled knowingly. "He's waiting." She stepped inside. Ethan stood by the window, staring at the city skyline. The sunlight caught the sharp edges of his jaw, the faint exhaustion in his posture. He turned when she entered, and for a fleeting second, the world seemed to hold its breath. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I almost didn't," she admitted. "But your note sounded like a challenge." A faint smile. "Maybe it was." He motioned for her to sit. The desk that once felt like a wall between them was clear. No papers, no distractions. Only 2 mugs of coffee and silence. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," Ethan began slowly. "For not noticing. For expecting you to be more machine than human. I created an environment where exhaustion was loyalty. That's not leadership, that's cruelty dressed as ambition." Lily listened, stunned. The man who once terrified board members now sounded like someone confessing to a crime only he could see. "You don't have to apologize," she said softly. "We all forget to breathe sometimes." He exhaled. "That's the problem, Lily. I forgot what it means to care." Her heart tightened. Then why now? He looked at her, something raw and unguarded flickering in his gaze. Because when I caught you, it felt like the first real thing I've done in years. The air grew still again. Words hung between them, fragile, trembling, real. She swallowed hard. You can't say things like that, Ethan. People will talk. Let them, he said quietly. For once, I don't care. Her breath hitched. No one had ever said that for her before, not in a world that thrived on appearances and pride. They stood in silence, the kind that said more than conversation ever could. Finally, Ethan stepped closer. You should take some time off. Not because you're weak, but because you deserve peace. Lily shook her head gently. Peace doesn't come from resting. It comes from knowing someone sees you. He blinked, and for the first time, she saw his eyes glisten, just slightly. Then I see you, Lily. Her throat closed around the words she couldn't say back. Instead, she smiled faintly. Then maybe that's enough for today. As she left his office, her heart beat differently, slower, steadier, alive. For the first time, she didn't feel invisible. Outside, the afternoon sun hit her face like a promise. Now it's your turn. Share one small good thing you did recently. Herb. Write it below so others remember that humanity still lives. Your story might light someone's path tonight. That evening, Lily sat by her apartment window, watching the rain chase its reflection down the glass. The city looked softer when it cried, like it, too, carried things it never said out loud. Her phone buzzed once. A message. Ethan, you left your notebook in my office. I could drop it off, or maybe you could join me for dinner. She stared at the screen, heart thudding. It wasn't just about a notebook, it was a door opening to something dangerous, something real. Her fingers hovered for a full minute before she typed back, just dinner. The restaurant he chose wasn't the kind billionaires were known for. No chandeliers, no photographers, just a quiet little place near the park, warm light spilling through fogged glass. Ethan was already there, coat off, sleeves rolled up. He looked more like a man than a CEO tonight. You came, he said, almost in disbelief. You did say I forgot my notebook, she replied, trying to sound light, though her voice wavered. He chuckled softly. I did. But maybe I just needed an excuse. The waiter brought them soup and fresh bread. For a while, they just sat there, two people pretending this was normal, that they weren't crossing invisible lines with every shared glance. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. You remind me of someone, he said. Someone from your past. He nodded. My sister. She used to push herself the same way you do, like if she stopped for a breath, the world would collapse. What happened to her? He paused, eyes distant. She didn't stop in time. The ache in his voice made Lily's chest tighten. I'm sorry, she whispered. He smiled faintly, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're the first person I've told that in 10 years. Why me? Ethan's voice softened. Because you listen like the world still deserves second chances. Lily didn't know what to say. The man who seemed untouchable now looked fragile, and in that fragility she saw herself reflected. Two people pretending strength was survival, when really it was just fear in a tailored suit. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. Ethan's phone buzzed, but he ignored it. For the first time, the empire could wait. You know, Lily said, stirring her soup, everyone at the office thinks you don't feel anything. And what do you think? She met his gaze. I think you feel too much, you just don't show it. Something shifted in his eyes, a quiet storm breaking. Maybe I don't show it because I don't know how anymore. The words hung between them like a fragile flame, small, trembling, but bright enough to warm the silence. By the time they left the restaurant, the rain had stopped. Ethan walked beside her, not too close, not too far. When they reached her building, he handed her the notebook. Thank you, she said softly. He nodded, hesitating. Lily, I know this isn't how things usually go between a boss and his employee, but I can't pretend what I feel didn't start that day you fainted. I've been trying to ignore it, but... She stopped him gently, placing a hand over his. Don't say it. Not yet. Let's not ruin something that just started healing. He froze, then smiled, a slow, heavy smile that carried both understanding and pain. You always know how to stop me just before I fall too far. Maybe that's what balance looks like, she said quietly. Ethan nodded once, stepped back, and left. Lily stood there long after he disappeared into the night, her pulse echoing in her ears. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for the first time, she wasn't afraid of it. If that moment hit you hard, leave a red heart hash. Sometimes one little symbol says what our hearts can't. The next week unfolded like an unspoken promise neither of them dared to touch. At the office, things appeared normal. Meetings, reports, polite greetings. Yet beneath every glance, every word, something hummed between them, a quiet electricity that both terrified and anchored them. One evening, as the last of the employees trickled out, Lily lingered at her desk, typing the final edits on the new campaign. The floor was silent except for the rhythmic hum of the air conditioning. She looked up when she sensed movement. Ethan stood by the glass door, watching her. You should have left hours ago, he said. So should you, she replied, half smiling. He walked in slowly, his shoes echoing against the marble. You know, I used to think silence meant productivity. Now I realize it's just loneliness in disguise. Lily paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. You sound like a man writing a confession. He chuckled under his breath. Maybe I am. He moved closer, stopping just beside her desk. The city lights behind him painted his face in gold and shadow. For a moment, he looked like someone caught between who he was and who he wished to be. Lily, about what I said the other night. You didn't finish saying it, she interrupted gently. That's because I didn't want to scare you, he admitted. But I can't keep pretending I don't care. Her breath hitched. Ethan, people already whisper. They'll think whatever makes sense to them, he said firmly. But the truth is, I haven't felt this alive in years. Lily stood slowly, her chair sliding back. This isn't safe, she whispered. Not for you. Not for me. He looked at her, not as a boss, but as a man stripped of his defenses. You think I care about safety? She swallowed hard. You should. He reached out then, not touching, just close enough that she could feel the warmth of his hand in the air between them. Tell me to stop, and I will. The silence stretched. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought it might echo through the glass walls. Finally, she stepped back. Good night, Mr. Cole. The way she said it, soft but trembling, was enough to break something inside him. He nodded once, retreating as if every step cost him a piece of his pride. When he left, Lily sat back down, pressing her palms over her face. Tears burned behind her eyelids, not from sadness but from confusion. Why did kindness always feel like danger when it came from him? The next morning, a message appeared in her inbox. Taking a short leave. Personal reasons. You'll oversee the new presentation. Her heart dropped. He was gone. Days passed. The office felt colder without him, quieter, like the heartbeat had stopped. She poured herself into work, pretending it didn't matter, that she didn't replay his words every night like a secret song. Then, a week later, an envelope arrived on her desk with no sender name, only her own written in Ethan's sharp handwriting. Inside was a single line. Some distances aren't punishment. They're proof that what we felt was real. Lily's chest tightened. She closed her eyes, clutching the letter to her heart. He hadn't disappeared, he'd stepped away because he cared enough not to destroy what they'd built. That night, she walked through the city alone, thinking of him under the same stars. She didn't need to see him to know he was somewhere, thinking of her too. And for the first time, that thought didn't hurt. It healed. Be honest, could you forgive after what they did? Thought balloon. Type forgive if you could, or never if it would break you too deeply. 2 months passed. The world kept moving, yet to Lily it felt slower, quieter, as if waiting for something to return. Ethan hadn't come back to the office. His name floated through whispers in the corridors, but no one knew where he'd gone. Some said he was in London, others thought he'd stepped down. She didn't ask. She just kept showing up, kept building what he'd trusted her with. But late one Friday, as she left the building, a familiar voice broke through the hum of rain. "Still working late?" Her heart froze mid-step. She turned, and there he was. Ethan Cole, standing under a black umbrella, rain cascading down his coat. His presence was as sharp and gentle as a memory she'd almost stopped believing in. "You're back," she breathed. "I promised I wouldn't disappear forever," he said quietly. "Though it seems you handled things perfectly without me." "You taught me well," she said, smiling faintly. He shook his head. "No. You taught me how to be human again." They stood there under the awning, the rain softening into mist around them. There was no need for grand confessions now, just silence, heavy with understanding. "I read every report you sent," Ethan continued. "You rebuilt the campaign better than I ever could. The board's calling it the company's rebirth." "Maybe it was yours too," she said softly. He met her eyes, his usual steel replaced by something fragile, humility. "I didn't deserve your kindness, Lily. And yet, you gave it anyway." She stepped closer, rain dotting her hair. "Maybe kindness isn't something people earn, Ethan. Maybe it's just something people need." He exhaled shakily, the corners of his lips lifting in a broken smile. "You sound like her again." "Your sister?" He nodded. "She used to say the same thing. That love isn't given because people are perfect. It's given because they are trying." Lily's heart ached at the tremor in his voice. "You still miss her?" "Every day," he admitted. "But now it doesn't feel like a wound. It feels like a reminder that I can still care for someone without losing them." For the first time, she reached out, her hand brushing his sleeve. "You didn't lose me either." Ethan blinked, startled. Rain glistened on his lashes. "You waited." "I didn't wait," she said gently. "I just didn't stop believing." Something inside him broke then, not in pain, but in relief. He lowered his umbrella and stepped closer until the rain touched them both. "Lily," he whispered, voice raw. "I don't know where this goes, or what the world will say, but if there's still a place for me in your life, I'd rather be there, even quietly, than live pretending I don't care." Her tears blended with the rain. "Then stay. But stay as you, not the boss, not the billionaire, not the man carrying guilt. Just you." He nodded slowly, the weight in his shoulders easing. "Just me." And for the first time since the day she collapsed, she saw him smile without sadness behind it. They walked together through the rain, no longer hiding, no longer pretending the world couldn't be kind to people like them. Sometimes healing didn't come with fireworks. It came quietly, in small steps, shared breaths, and gentle forgiveness that asked for nothing in return. If you believe love still wins, comment in, Dizzy. Let's fill this section with hope. Maybe someone scrolling right now needs to see it. The following weeks carried a different rhythm. Ethan no longer hid behind his office walls. He joined meetings, shared coffee breaks, and laughed, really laughed, with his team. The company, once tense and metallic in its silence, now felt alive again. People worked not from fear, but from pride. And Lily, though still quiet and humble, became the quiet center of it all. Every idea she shared, every smile she offered, carried the same warmth that had once pulled Ethan back from the edge. One evening, after everyone had gone, she lingered at her desk, flipping through notes. A soft knock on the glass made her look up. Ethan stood there, leaning slightly on the doorframe. "Still saving the world," he teased. "Only the parts you keep breaking," she replied, grinning. He chuckled, stepping closer. "Touché." He placed a small folder on her desk. "You've been promoted. Officially. Creative director." Her eyes widened. "Ethan, You earned it," he interrupted. "Not because of me. Because of you." Lily's throat tightened. "Thank you." He hesitated, then added softly, "There's a gala next week. The company's first charity event in years. I'd like you to come, as my guest." She blinked, unsure. "People will talk again." "They always will," he said with a gentle shrug. "But maybe this time, let them talk about the truth." At the gala, the lights shimmered like stars suspended just above reach. Ethan arrived in a black suit, timeless and calm. When Lily walked in, every head turned, not because of the dress she wore, but because of the peace in her eyes. Ethan's breath caught when he saw her. "You look," he stopped, smiling faintly, "like the reason I learned to slow down." She laughed softly. "You'll make the tabloids say you've gone soft." "Then let them," he said, offering his hand. They danced beneath the warm golden light, the room around them fading into a blur of faces and music. For a moment, it felt like everything that had broken, exhaustion, loneliness, fear, had been replaced by something unspoken but real. As the music softened, Lily whispered, "Do you ever think about that night?" "The hospital?" he asked. She nodded. "Every day," he said. "Because that was the day I stopped seeing people as workers and started seeing hearts instead." Her eyes shimmered. "And what do you see now?" He smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Someone who taught me that kindness isn't weakness. It's what saves us." Lily looked down, her heart swelling with both joy and ache. "You really did change." "No," Ethan said softly. "You just reminded me who I used to be." They stood there, close enough for the world to disappear, surrounded by applause they didn't hear. When the night ended, Ethan walked her to the car. Neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Lily said, "You know, I used to think stories like ours never last." He tilted his head. "And now?" "Now I think maybe they last in smaller ways, not in grand endings, but in how people remember being seen, being cared for." Ethan nodded slowly. "Then I'll remember this forever." The car door opened, but she didn't step in yet. She looked back at him, her voice trembling slightly. "Ethan, thank you for catching me, not just that day, but every day after." He reached out, fingers brushing hers. "And thank you for teaching me how to hold someone without trying to control them." Their hands lingered for a moment, just long enough to say everything words couldn't. When Lily finally drove away, Ethan stood beneath the streetlights, smiling softly to himself. The city pulsed around him, alive, forgiving, and somehow full of grace. If this story reminded you that kindness still matters, tap red heart hash right now, not for me, but for anyone who's ever been caught when they fell. Let's keep hope alive together. Tulip. Months passed, and life quietly wove itself into something gentler. The company flourished, but it wasn't the numbers that made people talk, it was the feeling. The building that once echoed with tension now carried laughter in its halls. Ethan and Lily had become symbols of something rare, empathy in a place built on ambition. On a crisp autumn morning, sunlight filtered through Lily's office window. She sat with a cup of coffee, reading a handwritten note tucked between her reports. "No meetings today. Step outside. EC." She smiled. Outside, in the small park across from the building, Ethan stood waiting by the fountain, the same warmth in his eyes that had first broken her walls. "Playing hooky again," she teased as she approached. "Let's call it recharging humanity," he said, offering her a cup of coffee identical to hers. They sat on the edge of the fountain, the world around them soft with morning light. For a while, they didn't speak, and they didn't need to. Silence between them had become something sacred, like a language only they understood. Finally, Ethan said quietly, "I used to think success meant building walls high enough to protect everything I cared about. But all it did was keep everyone out." Lily looked at him, eyes kind. "And now?" He smiled faintly. "Now I think success is letting someone in, even if it scares you." She reached for his hand, fingers brushing lightly against his. "You finally sound human, Mr. Cole." He chuckled. "Careful. You're going to ruin my reputation." She tilted her head. "You already did that yourself, the day you carried me through the office." He laughed softly, a sound that still felt like healing. "That was the first time in years I didn't care what anyone thought. I just didn't want to lose you." Lily's voice trembled. "You didn't. You found yourself instead." For a moment, neither of them moved. The fountain whispered beside them, leaves drifted in golden spirals, and the city hummed quietly in the background, the world, finally, at peace. Ethan turned toward her, his gaze warm and steady. "You know, I thought love was supposed to be fireworks. But this," he gestured around them, to the soft light, the calm air, her hand in his, This feels more like sunrise. Lily smiled through tears. Sunrise lasts longer. He squeezed her hand gently. Then let's make it last as long as we can. And in that moment, the story that began with exhaustion and collapse ended not with grand declarations, but with quiet understanding that sometimes the most powerful rescues happen when two broken people decide to stop running. If this story touched you, don't scroll past quietly. Tap red heart hash, not for me, but for the girl who fell and the man who caught her. One click can be your way of saying, I felt this too. And if you believe kindness can still change someone's world, share this story. Because somewhere, someone is still waiting to be seen. Rose. Moral warmth, soft close. In a world obsessed with strength, never forget, it takes courage to care, and even more courage to stay kind.